And so from 60 on, there was amongst some scholars and some politicians, but mainly scholars and other people who were interested in constitutional stuff, movements and commentary about we should have for all of Canada a Bill of Rights or something like that in the Constitution. And in 1980-81, for 17 months, 10 premiers and 1 prime minister negotiated to do 2 things. 1, bring the Constitution home from London. In other words, after 1981, if we were successful in doing this, we would not have to go to England anymore to approve or disapprove of our Constitution or anything else. We would be completely an independent nation in every way, shape, or form as it related to law and the Constitution. So that's one thing we were trying to do. And the other thing we were trying to do was to put a Bill of Rights, now called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, in that act at the same time. So that's what we were doing in 1980-81. And contrary to popular opinion that you might hear, is that this was done in a rushed kind of way. It was 17 months it took to negotiate this thing and to make sure we got the Patriation and we got the Charter. However, when we start negotiating, it was clear to some of the premiers, Bill Bennett of British Columbia, Peter Lougheed of Alberta, Blakeney of Saskatchewan, and Lyon of Manitoba, and some of us in the East as well, that these talks weren't going all that well. There didn't seem to be a real interest to get this done with us, all the premiers and the Prime Minister. And we were right, because halfway through, the Prime Minister took his marbles and went home. Okay? Said, I just can't negotiate with these guys anymore. And there were all guys there. There were no female premiers at the time. And so he decided, and we were wary of this for that time, for 7 or 8 months, that something was going to happen. Boom, it happened. He went to the House of Commons, passed his own law, saying he's going to unilaterally bring the Constitution home and unilaterally have his Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Well, yours truly, and Lougheed and Bennett and Blakeney and Levesque and Buchanan of Nova Scotia and McLean of PEI and yours truly, we said, you can't do that, and we're going to bring you to court. So we went to court against the Prime Minister. That's when the division came in our country. There were 8 premiers who were opposed to what the Prime Minister were doing, and there were 2 premiers or provinces that stayed with the Prime Minister. The 2 that stayed with the Prime Minister were Ontario and New Brunswick, Premier Davis and Premier Hatfield. The others, 8, said this is wrong. And so us 8 got together and decided that we would go to court against the Prime Minister on this in three courts, not go to all 8. We'll pick Newfoundland, we'll pick Quebec, and we'll pick Manitoba. And so we went to court to stop him from doing a unilateral move. How could one First Minister do this when we have a divided sharing of powers between the centre and the provinces, like I said earlier? So anything that affects the provinces, they should be not only consulted on, but they must approve. And we were pretty confident that we would win. Well, we thought we would win. Yeah, and I think we were pretty confident about it as well. So these 3 court actions began, and at the same time, the Prime Minister came under a lot of pressure, and he decided then that he would refer this new act to the Supreme Court of Canada. Very unusual for him to do that, because he was so unilateral and so adamant that he was just going to go ahead and do it. But he came under a lot of pressure, and of course our court cases also put pressure on him. And so what the Supreme Court of Canada did is took the 3 decisions from the 3 courts that came in, plus his reference, and made it into one case. And in September 1981, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled. Now, in 1981, The Supreme Court of Canada judges, perhaps unlike today, had as their top friend the law. Their second friend, but second, was the Prime Minister and the government. They were friends of the law, because some of those on the Supreme Court who could have made the difference were friends of the Prime Minister. And we knew that. But as any good lawyer will tell you, who went to school at least years ago, when you went to law school, the law was to be the ultimate for you. Nothing came between you and the law, and the plain meaning of the law. And so the Supreme Court of Canada ruled in our favor and said, Prime Minister Trudeau, yeah, I can't do this. This is unconstitutional. And then you won't hear that every day, because that's a narrative that nobody wants you to know about. You understand? That doesn't come up very much. That's why I want to bring it up tonight, for you to know. It was a rocky road. It wasn't an easy road to get to where we wanted to get. Especially when halfway through, the Prime Minister of the country decides to do something unilateral. And so he was forced back to the table. And then on November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 1981, we negotiated the Patriation and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which at that time when it was signed, that day on the 5th, was called the Patriation Agreement, which later turned into, when it went into legislation the next year, the Constitution Act of 1982. So it's the Constitution Act of 1982, which is the Patriation, but most important for us in this audience here tonight, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Okay. I thought at the time, I'm sure Mr. Bennett thought at the time, and Mr. Lougheed, and all of us. And by the way, who signed that? 9 provinces, and the Prime Minister signed that. The other 2 came on board, and it was only Quebec who wouldn't sign it. So we had 9 provinces and the Prime Minister. That means it was a national document. It wasn't a federal document as 1960. It was in the anything in the Constitution of Canada is a national document. It represents the nation, from Tofino to Iqaluit to Bonavista. It takes in all of us, okay? So when people argue with you about the Bill of Rights, you have to explain to them that the Bill of Rights is a federal document, not a national document. It doesn't include everybody. And we're about including everybody, every individual in this country, okay? Just for the record, it was the Newfoundland proposal that I presented on the night of the 4th, the morning of the 5th, to all the First Ministers later that day that broke the impasse so that we got the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in the Constitution. That's how it happened. And I guess that's why I'm so passionate about it now. But I do have a personal family history about it as well, because my whole family were independent people. And a lot of Newfoundlanders are extremely independent people, as they are all over the country. There's lots of independent people. But the key to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the key to it, is the individual. The key to it is the individual. There's no 2 snowflakes alike. There's no 2 human beings alike, thankfully. So that is crucial for you to understand. You, as a living being, as a living Homo sapien, you have certain rights that cannot be taken away from you, and it's in the Constitution. By the way, the beginning of the Charter of Rights says, whereas we have the supremacy of God, that's in the Charter of Rights. The supremacy of God and the rule of law. That's how it starts off before it gets into the individual items. Supremacy of God and the rule of law. That wasn't even in the BNA Act. That wasn't in the Bill of Rights, but it's in the Charter of Rights. That's the introduction to the Charter of Rights. Supremacy of God and the rule of law. Those 2 points in that whereas, leading into the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.